linked because they are linked to a very important issue, which is security. So why we're having this discussion at the COP is because the integration of climate smart agriculture principles into national policies is really crucial for addressing climate change in agriculture and food security. And I'm really grateful to our partners here for their work with Morocco and with other African countries on agriculture policies. And Morocco, like 50 other countries, has developed these national adaptation plans established under the UNFCCC to link international climate commitments with concrete adaptation policies at the national level, and have specific examples of Morocco's commitments, like the direct seeding initiative, where we reached 1 million acres by seeding, tested in Morocco for the last 40 years, proved effective in adapting to climate stress and improving soil quality. So this year, in the last crop season, 2022-2023, we noticed a productivity rate improvement of 35% in Morocco, 35, and in cereals production, because for us in Morocco, cereals are more important than rice. In this region, rice is more important, but in Morocco, we have an improvement of 62% production of cereals in the last season. Research and development is critical as well. So, and in Morocco, as you know, we support research consortium around INRA, IAV, ENA, ENFI, and other partners like University Mohammed VI Polytechnique, Al-Mutmer, etc. And we do that through ongoing investments and collaborative efforts. On the strategies, you know about Morocco's, since you're here, you know about Morocco's green generation strategy, the agricultural development, and the digitalization projects that are very important to transfer agriculture aids and incentives to the farmers. These are all important levers to develop climate smart agriculture, but like in other countries, what we notice is that climate smart agriculture faces multiple challenges related to data gaps, investment shortfalls, and I will insist on issues around policy coordination and convergence, because in addition, of course, to the structural climate-related issues like droughts and floods, etc. Policy convergence is important because all the priority projects that we have under NAPS fall into cross-sectoral activities, ecosystem management, water management, crop management, etc. In conclusion, I don't want to be too long. Morocco's initiatives in climate-smart agriculture and conservation practices reflect, as you know, a broader commitment to sustainable development and climate resilience. Collaboration across African nations holds the potential to really transform agriculture into a resilient, adaptive, and sustainable sector amid a changing climate. Why is that? Number one, according to OCP, our large fertilizers company, number one or number two exporter of fertilizers, Africa holds 60% of global unused arable land. 60%, 60. And furthermore, we know that phosphate-based fertilizers can be adapted to specific needs of the soil, the nature of the climate, the nature of the changing climate, and the specificities of local crops, leading also to higher yields. So I will finish with that. You have Africa, a continent with tremendous untapped potential, and Morocco providing a leading fertilizers exporter, providing 70%, 70, of the continent's fertilizers. Both have, Africa and Morocco both have a central place in the world's food security and the transition to a more sustainable agriculture and a more sustainable economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spinelli. I think that really provided the right context for why we actually need to focus on tools to improve tracking of adaptation in the agricultural context. And your showcasing of the progress and the experiences in Morocco, I think, should be viewed as an inspiration to everyone. So thank you. I'd like to now introduce our second speaker, Rita El Ghassi, who is the Director General of the AAA Initiative Foundation, the people who sort of orchestrated this whole project. So,
thank you very much, Minister. We are very pleased to have you today. So thank you very much for attending our important event. Dear guests and dear experts and colleagues, I'm thrilled to extend a warm welcome to all of you for this important event dedicated to the strategic tracking of climate change adaptation progress across the agricultural landscape in Africa. And before we start, I want to express my sincere gratitude to our core partners. Their support has made this essential tracking tool possible, contributing significantly to the AAA initiative missions. A special thanks goes to the GCA, the Global Center of Adaptation. So thank you very much. And to the German Agency for International Cooperation, the GIZ. Your leadership and support have been instrumental in realizing evidence-based adaptation planning throughout the continent. I also would like to extend our appreciation to the Alliance of Biodiversity International and SIAT. Your unparalleled research expertise in climate risks and vulnerabilities, coupled with the on-ground insight into the needs of small holders, have been crucial in shaping an inclusive and locally grounded platform. Please allow me just to give you a brief reminder of the AAA initiative and its central purpose. As an African-led multi-country platform, our goal is to mobilize, finance, and accelerate resilience outcome within the national and regional climate plan, adaptation plan, and strategies. We serve like a bridge between knowledge, finance, and policy communities, fostering inclusive dialogue that enhance coordination and catalyze investment that reach smallholder groups. We have developed 7 climate smart agriculture investment plans through the continent, and now we aim to simplify and exemplify ways to measure progress into the adaptation project. And this adaptation insight tool that we will present you is one possible answer. So let's today's discussion mark another milestone in driving strategic coordination and participatory learning around agricultural adaptation, where it's most needed. And thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you, Rita, for I think a very good overview of really how the AAA initiative is taking a leadership role in tracking adaptation and the results that you're beginning to realize all throughout Africa through the Pakistan agricultural investment plans, in other words. So thank you very much for that introduction. I'd like to now pass this over to, I'm going to mangle the pronunciation, Eddie Jorge Vasquez. Sorry, please come on over. He's with the, okay. Is with the Global Center on Adaptation, which I'm sure all of you are aware, to work and leadership around the world on the broad set of adaptation challenges we face.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining in this conversation. Thank you for the kind introduction. The Global Center on Adaptation is an international organization solely focused on climate adaptation, trying to help us all catch up with climate mitigation. Actually, just to give you the news, we finished a report that we're launching tomorrow, where actually we're very happy that climate financing has doubled over the last 2 years, but that proportion of adaptation has actually gone down from 7% to 5%. So we need a collective push for adaptation. And the most practical question of adaptation is agriculture in Africa. We know that there's a 1.4 reduction of food calories per year because of the climate trends of the most important crops in the country: cassava, maize, sorghum, rice. And food insecurity increases 5 to 20% after each flood or drought event in those communities. And once you have that food security, then you have malnutrition. Once you have malnutrition, you have stunting, and then it's the next generation of children that will have impact for their lives because of that process. So there's a lot that is known on the impacts of climate change, but the reality is that we don't know enough about how to monitor and track adaptation in the agricultural sector. And you know that unless you measure, you are not able to know that you're on track, you are not able to make practical decisions at the farm level or at the policy level. You don't know what is your roadmap, you don't know where you're going on adaptation. So in this engagement, we're very excited to be working with people, the initiative, with the support of GIZ, and it's really trying to become very practical. And the program that you're going to be hearing today has 3 partnerships. The first one with AAA initiative and SIAT to facilitate evidence-based adaptation planning and tracking in the African agricultural sectors. The second one with ILRI to increase the capacity of African countries and to promote knowledge exchange. And the third one with TAMO to really improve the capacity of African countries to generate and use risk and climate information for adaptation plans. 75 adaptation planning tools and frameworks have been identified and evaluated for use by policy and development planners in Africa. There has been a process right now of validation with potential users across the continent, and there has been disseminated. But there's so much to be done to really make sure that this becomes part and parcel of African agriculture. So we're very grateful to GIZ for the grant support, and we look forward to figuring out how to scale up that process. But just having those tools is not enough. We plan to bring them into the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, a 25 billion investment program designed with the African Union and the African Development Bank and many other multilaterals that is really trying to mainstream adaptation into the programs of large financiers in the country. So far, we have been able to influence close to $7 billion of investments over the last 24 months, 26 months, out of which 2 billion have been for agriculture. And therefore, we plan to, as these activities take on, to bring those adaptation tools to be able to measure what is true. Because in mitigation, you can measure tons of CO2. In adaptation, there's a long way to do. So we plan to bring this into large investment programs in Africa, and I hope that you can all accompany us in this journey to improve, to measure, is this the right roadmap on agriculture and adaptation in the country. Thank you so much.
And now, thank you very much, Vasquez. I think that mobilizing finance is a very good goal to have when it comes to adaptation. And I'm heartened by the progress that the GCA has made over the past 26 months, as you know. Um, Tracking that, of course, is critical. And I'd like to now finish off the introductory session with introducing Henry Shadow, who's the head of the content cluster at GIZ and Group of Finance. This is the financial backer for the project. A very important person who made a very good decision, I believe, by supporting this project. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I would first of all like to thank the Gestation African Agriculture Initiative. I would like to thank the African Adaptation Initiative and the Global Center Adaptation, for inviting us to this important event on mainstreaming climate smart agriculture in Africa today. Specifically, I would like to thank the colleagues before the Minister for the very inspiring words. We are all aware that Africa is particularly vulnerable to the adverse impacts of climate change, and the impacts are threatening the food security of millions of people, specifically on the African continent. At the same time, food security plays a crucial role in promoting human and planetary health. If agricultural food systems are transformed sustainably, they offer the opportunity to protect climate, preserve biodiversity, and secure food supplies. As the GIZ, German International Corporation, we are working together with our partner countries in different approaches on how we can improve food security, can improve the livelihoods of farmers in Africa in order to strengthen their long-term capacities and their resilience. Let me please give you three very brief examples of the kind of work we are doing at GIZ. First, we must keep in mind we can only manage what we understand. This is why GIZ, in cooperation with the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, PIC, has conducted climate risk analyses in various sub-Saharan countries in Africa. And these analyses, as you know, provide decision makers in partner countries with information, with adaptation scenarios that are based on state-of-the-art risk modeling. For example, in Zambia, this application of the tool has shown that adaptation measures such as conservation agriculture and also participatory climate services can buffer significantly the climate impact of crop yields. As a second example, for GIZ, we have been working to launch the climate risk source book recently, which is, we believe, a very valuable tool to aim to support policymakers and practitioners with state-of-the-art guidelines on how to conduct comprehensive climate risk assessments. It provides also sound guidance, and is important, on moving from climate risk assessment and information towards supporting risk-informed decision-making towards adaptation. GIZ has so far supported the implementation of NUTS in 55 countries, either directly through our bilateral portfolio or through the cooperation with our partner, the NUTS Global Network. And here support is provided to all the steps in the adaptation cycle, with particular focus on bridging the gaps between adaptation planning and the actual implementation of concrete adaptation measures. Most important, about to finalize, is for the success and for the sustainability of these measures, of course, is the ownership and leadership of the countries. Saying that because we would like to underline once again that in this case the Africa Adaptation Initiative is an important facilitator to support action on adaptation and resilience, and I would like to thank you for your steady efforts.
I would also like to take the opportunity to thank the initiative for the adaptation of African agriculture for your important work and the Global Center on Adaptation for our successful collaboration in supporting the implementation of AI. With this, I would like to close. I look forward to the presentation, to learning more about the digital adaptation strategy today. And I wish you all a very successful.
Thank you very much. I think it was really good for a important organization like GIZ that's really taken a lot of leadership when it comes to adaptation around the world. Your comment on ownership, has to be really something that's not done to countries and the people that serve well. So I very much appreciate that coming from the funder with so much relevance. So I think we got a really good overview of a lot of the motivations for this project. I'd like to now introduce Timo Leiter, who, if you want to ask someone, who could speak about monitoring evaluation for adaptation, I think Timo would be pretty much on every short list. And so with that, he's going to give a short overview of the state of play of adaptation tracking right now to give us a broader context. So over to you, Timo.
Thank you very much, Carl, and thank you very much for the invitation. Maybe I do speak into the extra mic. I do have some. Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much. I'm going to give you an overview of the state of adaptation. So I'm not going to talk so much about the technicalities of measuring adaptation progress, but where are we globally on adaptation? And so I'm going to give an overview of some of the recent reports on this matter, which have just been launched, the Adaptation Gap Report Unit, and some of the IPCC findings. This is not specific to agriculture, but it's about adaptation globally. Thank you so much, Lucy. Okay, so this is a really big question. Where do we stand on adaptation globally? It's not easy. There is not a single number we could use, right? So what do we know? There are currently, I would say, 4 global reports and some key research initiatives that inform us about the state of adaptation. Most importantly, of course, the IPCC AR6 report, which you see here. Then the annual adaptation gap report from UNEP, which I'm going to show you some findings of. Then the Global Center on Adaptation also has the state and trends reports, and the colleague just mentioned tomorrow, I think, is the launch. And of course, since we are at the negotiations, the Secretariat has been able to do a synthesis report on the state of adaptation, which you see there in the corner. It's not very well known, but the idea is that that feeds into the global stocktake, which will of course conclude here. But the global stocktake will not go into very much detail, but these reports do. And then there was also this very large research initiative, the Global Adaptation Mapping Initiative, which is trying to find what does the literature tell us about the implementation of adaptation. I've been involved in 3 of these 5, so I'm giving you some of the insights. So the talk is structured on these 3 dimensions that I think are really key to understand adaptation progress. Planning, finance and implementation. So these are the 3 core dimensions to understand adaptation progress. And of course, another question then, particularly in developing countries, is who benefits? So does it really get to the most vulnerable people, or is it just in general? And how effective is the intervention or the adaptation support, and how sustainable is it? So these are the guiding questions, if you want. We are starting this planning. So this is a diagram from the one of the 2 key diagrams from the planning chapter of the Adaptation Gap Report, which has just been launched, and we actually have a side event on the 5th as well. What you see here is the number of countries that have a national adaptation plan or a similar detailed national adaptation planning document. So the good news is that by now 90% of all countries worldwide have at least one such plan. The even better news is, if you look at the other curves, that by now more than 90 countries have actually updated that and have a second, more updated version of the map. Because what's really important is not just to have a plan once, but to make sure the plan is on time, and of course linked to other planning processes in the country of development planning. So the good news here is on these other curves, 90 countries have the second one. Some countries even have their third or their fourth iteration. However, this is the world map, so you see the countries that have at least one. That's from the 2020 report. And if you look at the world map, it looks kind of all green here in a good state. But what's really important is we need to look at the quality of the planning. So it's not just number of countries that have a plan, but are these plans good? And if you contrast the roadmap to this bar chart, so what the chapter in the adaptation gap report is doing is looking at each of these plans according to 5 criteria, whether that can be implemented, whether that has been inclusive, whether there's monitoring and evaluation. And once you do that, you see there are lots of these red colors. So the second aspect is the quality of these plans, and there's still lots of room for improvement in the plans and in their implementation, because the plan is only good if it's being implemented. So you'll find more details in the chapter about that, but it's something very important to keep in mind. Now looking at the second dimension, adaptation finance, this is also a finding from the chapter in the report. So this year's adaptation gap report and also the state and trends report has really looked at adaptation finance and have updated the estimates which the 2016 report had. And we found that the gap is even bigger than previously estimated. As you can see, the adaptation costs are estimated at 215 billion this year. And adaptation finance needs are even higher. What is important is there's not a single number, there's always a range. Why is that? Because it depends on the uncertainties of climate change, most importantly, how warm it will get. If we get to 2 degrees, it will be a tremendously higher adaptation cost than if we have 1.5 degrees. So you always have these ranges. Very important aspect is that if adaptation finance is doubled, as was promised in Glasgow, this is only going to close the gap by 5 to 10%. So we are still very far away from closing the gap. At this COP, there's also a report from the Standing Committee on Finance on doubling of adaptation finance, which includes more details. And the tricky bit really is the needs are so enormous that they cannot possibly be filled only by public finance. That's not going to work. So we need new financial sources. The World Bank just had a report on using all the subsidies which are currently spent on harmful activities and rediverting them to adaptation finance or mitigation finance. That could be one of the new sources of financing. Okay, now coming to the actual juicy bit, which is implementation of adaptation. So in 2021, I did a global stock take. I looked at which countries have enough and are they tracking the implementation of them? And I found that 60% of them don't. So which means many countries which have enough don't necessarily implement them, which is of course a problem. So we need better national adaptation monitoring and evaluation systems, and as part of that also better sectoral monitoring and evaluation. Therefore it's great news that GSZ together with partners in Morocco is working on this particular topic, and Keith is going to present the tool, one of the tools for this. So as of 2021, there were 23 countries which had enough implementation reports, and 15 had enough evaluation. By now it's a bit higher, and this is also one of the topics that's been discussed under the global goal on adaptation in the negotiations. So how can we track better if these plans are being implemented? On the topic of adaptation, tracking adaptation indicators, just very briefly, that we don't have, of course, a global set of adaptation indicators because adaptation is much more difficult to measure. It's not a physical quantity that we can easily measure, so we will never have like a single global indicator compared with greenhouse gas emissions. It's impossible. Don't try to search for it. In 2019, we had the background paper on adaptation metrics for the Global Commission on Adaptation. And we found that sectoral approaches are actually the way to go. Because once you're looking at sectors, there's better metrics you can compare and something that's more specific. For example, we also don't have a single indicator for sustainable development. And therefore, we also don't have one for adaptation. But we can look at agriculture, we can look at water, we can look at ecosystems. The key challenge is to find, are these indicators actually measuring adaptation or are they measuring something else? But more background is in these publications if you're interested in this topic. And now I'm giving you one more chart from the adaptation gap report, this year's chapter. So in the implementation chapter, we are looking at the number of new adaptation projects that are being funded by the Adaptation Fund, the Green Climate Fund, and the Global Environment Facility. So what you see here in this chart is the number of new projects per year and the financial volume of these projects. So the yellow one is the annual financial volume of newly starting projects. What we can see is we had kind of a linear trend up until 2015. Then the number of projects kind of declined or plateaued, but we have more bigger and bigger projects. That's because of the Green Climate Fund. So we now have more projects which are 25 million, 50 million, even 100 million, which allows to more systematically address adaptation risk. So it's a positive development. But we would need to see both of this combined. We would need to see bigger projects and more projects every year, and that's what we don't see. So that's one of the findings of the report and of the implementation chapter. This diagram here accounts only for 10% of adaptation finance, so there's only one snippet of the picture. That's the reason is that's the one where we have the best data. Yeah? So there are many more initiatives. GSF is doing all these projects. I used to work at GSF before. All the bilateral donors, that's not covered in this chart. So the challenge for us really is to find data sources on adaptation, and therefore it's great to hear about this project. And Lucy's going to present more on the cultural sector. So I've got only one final slide to leave you with. This is from the summary of policymakers of the IPCC AR6. So if there's one paragraph to sum up the adaptation state globally, it's this paragraph. So if the IPCC confirms there is an adaptation gap, high confidence. Adaptation so far is mainly fragmented, it's small in scale, it's incremental, and looking mainly at near-term risks. Climate change is increasing faster than what many scientists thought it would be. We are seeing all these extreme events, so that is a problem. And of course, the adaptation gap is going to grow. Or in other words, climate risks are outpacing the increases we have in adaptation action. And that's what we need to work on. And M&E will be very important to understand better what we're doing and where we're getting to. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Timo. If I could just try to characterize in a few words your assessment, it would be we made some progress, but we're falling behind. Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have a question? We don't have much time, but I'd love to open this in case anyone would like to. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
If you're interested in the slides, you can email me because I don't think they will be distributed. But yeah, and also of course the adaptation gap report, the GCA, the IPCC report. You find all the details in those reports. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you, Timo, again. And now I think one thing on the agenda. There was an opportunity for those of you, in particular those practitioners in Africa, to raise any points about some of your experience and how they might relate to tracking adaptation progress. And I want to ask if anyone would like to say a word or two about what you've been doing and how it relates. So anyone? No? Yeah, okay. Okay, well, we'll think about it, okay? Because there might be an opportunity to say a few words after we learn more about this tool. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce Lucy, and I've always just called her Lucy because I'm very bad at pronouncing it. No, never mind, never mind. But I've been very pleased to get to know Lucy because we've been working together on one component of this project related to indicators. And so I've been very pleased to learn a lot from Lucy. She's a pastoral adaptation progress expert, recently awarded a PhD at Morocco University. And she's going to speak the nitty-gritty about this project, the details. What is this tool all about? And so that we can see how we can deploy it. So please, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Carl. Um, it's okay if you couldn't pronounce the name. My name is Dr. Njuguna. I go with Lucy, most simply. And I know we are running out of time, but I'll try to tell you in as much detail as it is possible in the remaining time about the tool that we've been working on. And we started with a very brilliant opening remark that already mentioned the importance of adaptation in Africa. So it's contextualized. The opening remarks also mentioned about the climate smart adaptation investment plans that have been developed for the various countries in the African continent. But one striking point that came out was from the minister and also from the GSM representative is the importance of being able to measure adaptation, because what you're not able to measure, we cannot know which direction we're heading. Then Timo came in and he told us about where we are at in terms of progress in adapting to the impacts of climate change, but also highlighted the difficulty of being able to measure this adaptation, right? We've had a few assessments that have been made. For example, with the projects that have been evaluated or assessed so far, it's only 10% of these projects. But what if you had a tool that you can actually use to keep track of the projects that are going on within your country? It's not just your country, even within your continent. Yeah. And with this tool, you can be able to understand all the dynamics of the project, like who are the beneficiaries, who are the actors, how much is being invested into adaptation. And that's not all. But if you had a tool that guided you in your efforts of designing components of tracking adaptation, like how to develop indicators, what to consider when you're tracking adaptation. So what I'll be presenting to you today is a step towards this direction to make it a reality, to showcase what we've been able to do within 6 months, and to show that it's possible to be able to develop tools that then we can consolidate and be able to understand the progress we're making in adaptation. And the tool I'll be presenting, there is a brilliant team behind it. I'm only a spokesperson today. We have a team at SIAT, Todd, Andrea, Lolita, and Darby, who have been helping with all the data extraction, data analysis, and even inputting the slides I'll be presenting today. And of course, the funding came from GSZ through GCF, and we have our partners, the AAA initiative, and also INRA and FADA, who have been supporting us in the case study in Morocco. So I'll try to be brief as possible, Carl, in case I go over time just a little, because I can talk about adaptation tracking till the sun goes down. And to start with is just to highlight some of the principles that guide our work, because we needed to start from a point of common understanding of why are we tracking adaptation and why should we and how should we track it. So, and as Timo mentioned, it's not possible to have just one magical metric that you can use to track adaptation. It's even not possible maybe to have one universal tool. Rather, it's likely that we are going to have a toolbox that then we can be able to draw on, and depending on the purpose of tracking adaptation, determine which tool is most appropriate. So for us, we are casting a wide net to be able to incorporate as many views as possible, and to incorporate as many methods of tracking adaptation. So what we are hoping to design is a tool that allows the incorporation of, for example, different actors who are already collecting data and being able to bring it together to understand adaptation progress at a national or even continental level. And the other issue is that most of the time when we talk about adaptation tracking, some of the common elements we hear about is indicators. We need indicators, we need indicators. But that is just a tip of an iceberg. And what we've shown, I'm showing here is an iceberg, and we use it as a metaphor to communicate what is adaptation tracking. Adaptation tracking goes beyond just indicators. It's not even about just identifying the best adaptation actions, but it's rather also understanding, for example, what are the adaptation pathways that help us to understand what does a resilient system look like. So even when you get to designing your own indicators, they should be corresponding by your contextual definition of resilience. Okay? Then again, the issue of data, it's likely not to be just data coming from one actor, but rather we need the partnerships that can help us to integrate data systems that then allow us to effectively track adaptation. Then again, the question of capacities, for us to be able to sustain adaptation tracking is not going to be a one-off event. but rather as much as we continue experiencing the impacts of climate change, we should continuously be able to track it as well. So this is just to represent the dynamics all around adaptation tracking. It's not just about indicators, but rather a whole suite of components that we need to think about. And this iceberg metaphor, it corresponds very well with the adaptation cycle, which is commonly being discussed in the discussions on the global goal on adaptation. Mainly because adaptation tracking helps us respond to specific questions around this adaptation policy cycle. So, for example, understanding what risks climate risks are we responding to, what kind of adaptation is going on, by whom, how people are adapting, like the whole suite of strategies, whether it's at a farm level, investments by private sector, investments by the government, and then to be able to understand is adaptation actually occurring in terms of its effectiveness and adequacy. And this is a key component because then we want to understand who is benefiting, how, and by how much. Okay? And still in line with that, being able to incorporate different views to understand adaptation effectiveness, because what is adequate adaptation efforts for one person will not be the same for another person. So then you need to bring in all these perspectives together to understand the whole diversity of adaptation actions, adaptation experiences, and even and this needs to be across temporal and spatial scales. And so this brings us to the project that we've been doing. And the main goal of this project was to design an innovative tool that enhances our capacities, the capacities of African agriculture stakeholders, especially at the national level, to undertake adaptation planning, investment, monitoring, and evaluation. And as I said, this was only for 6 months. We've been working since June to November, and the project itself had two interlinked components. So the first one was to develop a map of actors, and I'll show that in a little bit. And here we wanted to document all the projects that are going on within the 10 countries that have already developed climate smart agriculture investment plans. And the second component, which was linked to the first one, is to develop tracking tools that enable us to measure progress and effectiveness to increase support and finance for African adaptation, agriculture adaptation. And so, as I've just mentioned, the scope of this project was covering only the 10 countries within Africa that have climate smart agriculture investment plans. And these have already been mentioned by the minister and by the DCA representative who talked about the 10. And these were in Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Lesotho, Mali, Morocco, Republic of Congo, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. This is just a bit of detail on the investment plans. And so the two components, as I mentioned, the first one, which is represented at the bottom, relates to the development of actor maps. And there was a whole process, so you can see, so the bottom is about developing of the actor maps, but then at the top is about developing adaptation tracking systems. And I'll talk briefly through this process before getting to the output without going into very much detail. So, actually, let me first talk about the process so that then I can jump directly to the output. So, in terms of the developing actor maps, so we started by first looking through online material to develop a list of these actors, being able to understand where they are working, what kind of project and their objectives. Before then, extracting this data, developing interfaces that you can be able to visualize the results and be able to characterize this information on where the actors are working. Then the second component, which was about developing the adaptation tracking systems, was building still on the CSIPs, because I said this is where we were limiting our scope. And these CSIPs provided the entry point in developing, for example, the impact pathways, the indicators, and the linkages with the data systems. So this singles out the component. 5 minutes? Okay. Okay, let me talk a little bit about the actor mapping component, which was the first component that we developed. So we started by developing Google Forms because the whole idea is that, well, our mandate was to develop a tool within this time frame, is to also establish a mechanism that we can still be able to use these tools and for data collection and also the outputs beyond this 6 months project. So for example, we've designed Google Forms that can be used even beyond now to collect information on actors. So Google Forms it's a well-known technology, easy to use, easy budget. So it also allows other actors, for example, if anyone sitting here will be interested to use it to collect information on projects going on within their country. And this database looks at 24 different variables around this project. So for example, what interventions, the partners around the project, the beneficiaries, and the budgets. And here, the scope was between 2015 and 2023. So it includes some projects that have already been closed and some are still ongoing. And in total, we've mapped 409 projects that are just within the 10 countries. And we have just over 1,000 actors. So you can imagine if we are able to collect this just within 6 months, if we have collaborative effort across actors, how much data we can be able to bring out. And here on your right is just a visualization using the map of Africa that maps the different actors, where they are working, with the color differences showing the sizes of the projects. Here is just to show the different possibilities of what you can do with the data that you have. So we were testing out, for example, how to show the connections between the actors. So the first one on your left, you can see it's quite messy and it's difficult to single out what is happening. So then we decided to work with maybe better representations of, for example, an individual actor. Here in the middle, you can see, for example, this one actor has about 5 projects, and in total they have around 9 partners. So it becomes a better visualization of the connections and the dynamics that are going on across these actors. And then this other one is the actor relationship in terms of how the actors are linked together. And you can do much more with the tool. So here is just one of the interfaces where you can be able to search a particular partner, be able to see their level of engagement. So if you can see, for example, the difference between the actor, the second one with the blue dot, and this other one with the bigger blue dot, they have different density of actors they are linked to. And you can also see the concentration of the projects within the different countries based on the locations of where these projects and actors are. You can even go to more in-depth description of the actor engagements, basically by looking at the partners and the projects with the details of who those partners are and what are their secondary linkages. Then the other bit is being able to track the beneficiaries and the budget. So here you have a functionality that you can switch between just visualizing a partner to visualizing a project. And for example, as illustrated here is the amount of money that the cost of adaptation. So at the moment, we are not able to tell how much was actually used for adaptation or for other activities because at this stage, you can only tell the total budget of this project. So there's definitely some opportunities to unpack this information further. And here is the distribution of beneficiaries based on the counts of target beneficiaries. So for example, you can see on the top is the projects that are targeting civil society organizations or extension officers or farmers, pastoralists, or producer groups. So we try to create these broad categories of actors, but there needs to be some sort of standardization to ensure that we are actually looking at data that is talking about the same types of actors. Okay, I will stop it at there. There's much more that I could show. So in case you're interested to learn more about this tool, I'll be happy to share more. Thank you.
Lucy, we do understand that we actually do have to wrap up. I'd just like to say thanks, Lucy, to everyone who worked on this project, to all of the people who created the context for this, why we're doing this, what's their motivation, what's going on, what's the state of play right now, and then how we get this tool. So I hope that we can take this tool further advance it and see how it can work in practice, and so we can learn, we can do a better job of tracking where we're going, we can mobilize finance more appropriately, more appropriate manner. And so, having said that, I'd just like to thank everyone. I want to just call out one thing. There's going to be an event tomorrow, 3:30 here in the Moroccan Pavilion, and it's going to basically showcase the International Platform on Adaptation Metrics work. We've developed 4 policy papers and a statement of principles on adaptation metrics for global goals. And so I hope that this will be a useful contribution. I think this is of interest to you. That's again tomorrow at 3:30. But now I must say thank you, goodbye, and I hope that this was constructive and will spur us on to better things.